Elio guys, and welcome back. So here you're starting off on your Infinite Magicraid journey, and I'm going to do my best here to provide you with the most information that I can. So a little bit about me before we get into the whole reroll units that you should be aiming for is, my name is Elio, of course. I've been playing this game since its inception via soft launch, which came out roughly at the end of February, and over time I've compiled not only a beginner's guide to help you take you to your next level in terms of Infinite Magicraid and your understanding of the game, but I also have an active tier list that I change pretty much on a weekly basis. So if you guys haven't joined the subreddit yet, feel free to do so. That way, in case you end up pulling a unit that's not on this list, you can still develop some type of understanding. Remember, it's opinion, not fact, of that unit as you continue on through Infinite Magicraid. But let's go ahead and get right into the video, you guys. So when it comes to rerolling, Infinite Magicraid unfortunately isn't very kind with the rerolling process, at least at the time of me recording this video. I would suggest if you are going to reroll that you go ahead and make multiple accounts via like an emulator. Make sure you have multiple email accounts as well. That way you can kind of do this all at once, because it does take a bit of time. I would say roughly maybe an hour or so to get to your first legendary summon, and a lot of players stop by the second legendary summon here. But let's say for instance you went ahead and already pulled a legendary and you're curious to see if that character is worth keeping or not. Well, unfortunately, due to Infinite Magicraid's like broad spectrum of different units here, there's a lot to cover, and I'm going to do my best to kind of focus on a few of those units. Keep in mind, if you don't see a unit on this list, it's not to say that they're bad or they're impossible to clear out through the campaign. It's more so just saying that I haven't really had the time to test them to see what their full potential is in terms of being like a reroll character that you should go for here. Now, in terms of the reroll characters, I will divide this video up into two separate sections here. I deem it the easy ones, and also the hard ones are the more difficult ones. The easy units that you may reroll for kind of don't really do much in the beginning of the game, because no units whatsoever do anything at the beginning of the game, but they kind of take off at the very end, and they help with just overall content outside of campaign as well once you get deeper into the ranks and deeper into stages. Now, the harder units, unfortunately, they start off really good, and then as time goes on, you see them get progressively weaker, but not so much weaker in a sense that they're like just becoming weaker, but because as monsters kind of scale up in terms of their levels and stuff, it gets a bit more difficult here. So they do have their biggest uses in the beginning, and then later on you are going to have to play the game manually if you want to clear out the campaign. I've done it myself here. I have proof. I've beaten the game even with no mythics, no dot characters or damage over time characters, just single target DPS. So it is indeed possible. It's just a lot more challenging. But let me stop talking and actually focus on the units here. Alright, so if you're going for the easy route, it's going to be focused on HP burners. Now you may be asking yourself, what are HP burners? Well, HP burn in terms of Infinite Magicraid is a dot/a debuff, which is damage over time debuff that applies a HP burn debuff to the target, and with that HP burn, it kind of scales off of that target's max HP. So if a target has X amount of HP, it's basically going to tick off X amount of HP from that unit. Now, it does cap off at the player's or the attacker's HP. So even if you have a boss with 1 million HP, you're not going to take off 8% of the boss's HP at a time. That would just be extremely OP. But even in that scenario where it's kind of maximized by the attacker's HP, it still does a hell of a lot of damage, especially when you're fighting units that are at level 260, and your units, their max level is 150. So it makes sense here. But on the list is going to be none other than our boy Hardac. I know people say that he's a girl. We've actually had the developers via Discord actually confirm that he is a boy. So the best part about Hardac is going to be his first skill right here, which deals X amount of damage to a target, and it also spreads over to 2 enemies as well. So this is a basic attack AoE move, meaning that it's just going to be weak naturally because you're hitting multiple units at the same time. But the main selling point is going to be HP burning, which has an 80% chance when fully booked up to stick for 1 layer for 2 turns. Now once you get it to 5 layers, which is what you want to do very quickly here, that's when you see the benefit of that burn going like ham and just eating away HP. This is what makes HP burning so universally helpful, because it doesn't matter if that unit's level 1 or level 260, as long as you have enough HP or if you have a high threshold of HP, you're basically going to be doing all kinds of damage all the time, which is super important in the later stages where things get rough here. And the same thing with his AoE. Once again, this is applying a lot of HP burning stacks, and the main goal of HP burns is just like any other dot. You want to get those stacks up as soon as possible and basically just eat away at whatever that you're fighting's HP. And then I would say second on the easy reroll characters list, I would have to say Sigmund without a doubt. He recently got a buff here. He went from meme to dream, and he's basically his Zanja, but slightly less effective, if that makes any sense here, because his basic attack does the same exact thing, where he can not only apply HP burning to a target with it fully booked up with an 80% chance, but he can also kind of heal off of that damage as well. And then for his ultimate as well, this does the same thing where you hit all enemies for X amount of damage, and with this skill fully booked up, it goes to 100% chance. But let me go ahead and show you guys a couple more HP burn units before we kind of talk about an overview for the easy reroll characters. So another HP burn unit that is very, very helpful is going to be none other than baby girl Melia here. Her main selling point though is switching over to her Valkyrie form, which is where the real money happens at, because due to her ability to not only counterattack damage, there's also a possibility of her applying HP burning to the targets that hit her, or if she hits them. So if you slide over here to the skill switch button, and we can click on this move right here, when she attacks, once again there's 80% chance to inflict that HP burning for 2 turns, which is lovely. Her second move over here is single target, but once again there's a 70% chance to inflict HP burning, and yeah, it's just money. And one of the main selling points about Melia too is that when she takes damage, she's going to counterattack. So even though the counterattack may not do a lot of damage, that doesn't count towards the turn cap, and you can still get some more DPS out of her. Now I'm not going to say that she's going to be the best HP burner out of all of these guys, because we've already covered his Zanja and Sigmund, but if you pulled her and Sigmund, for example, in my opinion, you're set. And then the last but not least, honorable mention for the HP burners. Any 4 of these units, if you guys can get 1 of these, or if not, if you can get 2 of these, if you are deciding to go through the reroll route, is going to be super helpful in the long term for you, is going to be my boy Oakman. Now Oakman is a mix in between HP burning and burn, so he does take advantage of, say for instance, if a unit on your team can boost up his attack because he has that burn built into him, but his main selling point once again is the HP burning, because his first skill right here, when fully booked up, it is only a 50% chance, but he can get freaking HP burning going off, and it hits 3 enemies just like his Zanja over here. His second move does the same thing where it hits all enemies with all kinds of burn and HP burn, and with this skill fully booked up, it goes up to 90%, which is money in my opinion. And then over here for his ultimate, he attacks an enemy, you know, 5 times at random, so you can't control who he hits, but if you're hitting one single target, there's a high chance, especially with this move fully booked up, which brings up that chance to 70% of you getting burn and HP burn on that target. Alright, so quick recap here. These are the 4 HP burners, at least to my knowledge at the time of this video, that are super helpful in terms of getting through the campaign and making it as easy as possible to not only get through it, but get through with 3 stars so you can get your Catherine. And they're just overall, once again, universal units that you can use elsewhere in dungeons and stuff of that nature, because once things get hectic, especially with a later point in the game, stats are going to be very rough to get through, and if you can kind of cheese those bosses with debuffs instead, that's going to be the biggest money maker here. So these are the easy units. If you can pull 1 of these, if you can pull 2 of these, you are just swimming in money here. Now we're going to move over here to the harder units. Now keep in mind that it is still possible to clear out the campaign. I've done it myself here. It was a very challenging time, but I definitely learned a lot. So if you want to go this route because you may have picked that unit and you started the game and maybe found this video a day or 2 later, then just roll with it. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're having fun and you're still clearing out content in the game, then I don't think it really matters what units that you're using, as long as they aren't utter dog water here. So first on the list is going to be my boy Dario. I do not own him, but I would definitely love one. And what makes Dario so lovely is he does a lot of single target hits, but due to their damage modifiers, it's extremely high. So in terms of raw damage, he's just one of the best units to have here, which if you combine it with other units that can apply stuff like defense down onto the units that you're fighting, or if you can apply attack up to Dario, he's going to hit like a butt cheek on a stick. And that's very important for single target DPS or AoE target DPS of you getting the most damage modifiers out of them to hopefully kill whatever that you're fighting as soon as possible, because it gets dicey in the later parts of hell. I'm telling you guys, it gets really dicey here. And then another good move from Dario is going to be his arrival skill, which unbooked does 500% of his attack damage to a single enemy. If you buck this skill up though, it goes to a whopping 660% of his attack damage, which is absolutely great for nuking. Now his ultimate in general is a bit weird because it ignores defense, but it cannot crit, but don't think because of that nature that you have to build him weirdly. He's just like any other attacker in the game where you should be focusing on crit rate, crit damage, and attack. It's the same thing. Just because this move doesn't crit, are you going to literally waste building him to his maximum potential when he has 2 other moves that can still crit? I wouldn't. Another, and honestly one of my favorite units, if you guys have joined the Discord you already know, is going to have to be my baby girl Sia over here. Sia is amazing because just like Dario, she is a high single target damage dealer. And the best part about Sia too is, even though I'm a little bit biased here, you're going to understand why I'm biased, is that she's very new player friendly if you decide to go on the harder route, and you can still use her in other content just due to her flexibility in general here. So the main selling point about Sia is that she has her Broken Snow, which is her ultimate right here, which does 600% attack damage to a single enemy. When it's fully booked up though, it does go into the 700 range. I believe it caps out at 720% of her attack damage. You may be saying, okay, that's high damage, but it doesn't do anything else. Wait, there's more. If you slide over here to her second skill called Concentration Increase, this move right here increases her self-critical rate by 40%. That is huge. And then she also gets an additional 60% crit damage, unbooked. With this move fully booked up though, she gets 110% additional crit damage from just casting this move. So hopefully you're putting 2 and 2 together here. Right before you pop off her ultimate, you want Concentration Increase to go off. This is very new player friendly in my opinion though, because if you think about it, if my damage for Sia is always based off of her doing Concentration Increase, she only needs 60% of her crit rate and she's good to go. Then I could focus on either bumping up her attack or focusing higher on more additional crit damage to get the most bang for my buck here. Very lovely girl. And another big selling point of Sia too is her passive here. So if you take Concentration Increase into account, you're like, okay, I just cast this move, which is like a charge up move. Am I missing out on damage? No, with her passive right here, when it's fully booked up, there's a 100% chance that she's always going to attack an enemy. It may not deal a whole bunch of damage, but it does deal 200% of her attack damage to an enemy. So you're still on a very high rotation of burst damage. Then you have regular damage and this burst damage, etc. It just keeps going on, and it's super great, especially in a PvP situation if you want to get that concentration increase off to hopefully nuke like a mythic called Luna, for example, and take her out. Because if you don't kill Luna in a lot of scenarios, especially once you begin the game, you're probably going to lose. So lose in general isn't a single target unit specifically because this ultimate over here has AoE. So my biggest thing with AoE characters is that if you're going to use them, make sure number one that they're powerful, and number two, make sure if you're rocking an AoE character and you happen to get another AoE character, then perhaps think about rocking both of them together here, because unless you have high single target units that can do a lot of burst damage, then running 2 AoE characters that already do significant amounts of damage may be better for you, because with that there's the hope that you can kind of clear out multiple units at the same time versus just one. But it really depends on that unit. But Luz is once again a very good mention if you want to go ahead and stick with him. Another worthwhile mention is going to be Sonnet 2. Sonnet is just like Sia, but she's more so of the AoE version of Sia. So she can kind of not only boost up her own crit rate, but I do believe she can also boost up her own piercing rate as well, which kind of adds in with more damage. And she's also one of the highest hitting AoE damage characters because of that. Because she has her innate crit rate kind of built into her character here, once again, you can do the same thing with Sia. Focus on getting that crit damage up so she can just clear out enemies as soon as possible. And very helpful in terms of PvP as well. Ariel is another great mention too. She's just like Sia, but a little bit less player friendly, I would say, because she kind of needs stealth or concealment to maximize her damage, which her kit has that built in already. But if you pick a unit, you know, to pair it with her like Vera, for example, then you can kind of mitigate that and just keep stealth and concealment up on that baby girl all the time. So she only has 2 skills and then 2 passives, but those 2 passives kind of augment and kind of build up her 2 skills that she has. So it's very important that you guys keep that stealth and concealment on her. She does have high single target damage, you know, because look at her ultimate, for example. Unbooked up, it does 600% attack damage to a single enemy. Fully booked up here, I'm not going to do the math for you, but it is over 700, which is absolute smiley face gaming. So another honorable mention, she may not be as appealing as Sia, but I assure you she can do just as much damage as all of the other units that I've listed here in the correct scenario. Another honorable mention here is going to be my boy Muto. Now Muto does require stacks to get him into his werewolf form right here, but just going through his skills real quick, you know, his single target skill does decent damage. His 280% attack damage, and we gain a layer of boiling, which helps him transform to his werewolf form. This one right here boosts up his attack by 20% for 2 turns. Once again, this is more like a Sia situation where you want to pair this skill up with his ultimate so it hits like a butt cheek on a stick. This is great if you want to kind of nuke targets, especially at the end of the game, or in a PvP situation once you've like applied defense down to them to hopefully just tear them. You just want to get those units out of here as soon as possible, you guys. Serena is another good pick too, because the interesting part about Serena is due to her feather stacks, once it hits a certain amount here, her single target skills turn into AoE. Now I'm not going to say right off the bat that this is super amazing because it takes time to build up, but once it's built up because maybe a stage has been lasting for a while, that's when things get a little bit insane with her. And I will say that if you're going to rock Serena and she's not at exclusive level 3, meaning that you've pulled her numerous times to get copies of her, then make sure you kind of pair her up with another unit that can apply attack up to her, just so you get that benefit damage of having another AoE character to kind of pair up with her, because it may be a little bit lackluster because she doesn't have her exclusive level 3, but she's still just an honorable mention on this list right here, because other players have used her to kind of clear out the campaign and 3-star her, but they did end up with multiple copies of her to do that. So if you encounter Serena, especially in a PvP situation, make sure you take her out. Last but not least, we have Maeve. She is a newer legendary versus the other ones that we've kind of shown in this video here, and it's for good reason. Now, she's purely a single target, but it is absolutely lovely what she does here. So she has her basic attack right here, which does X amount of attack damage to a single enemy, and there's a 20% chance to hit them with Hypnotize for 1 turn, which means they can't attack you. Her second skill over here does 360% of her attack damage to a single enemy. Once again, fully booked up. This gets raised to roughly 480% if my calculations are correct. And then the money right here, with a 70% chance to reduce their defense by 60% for 2 turns. That is already a high rate. So hopefully you're kind of picking up what I'm putting down here. With defense down applied on that unit, you can then slide over here to her ultimate and do all kinds of damage. You could then slide over there to Dario's ultimate and do all kinds of damage, even though that move ignores defense. You can slide over there to Sia's ultimate and do all kinds of damage. Same thing with Lou, same thing with everyone else that is doing, you know, high raw damage. This goes for anyone. That is absolute money here. And then we have our ultimate right here, which deals 3 stages of 200% attack damage to a single enemy with an additional 50% piercing rate, fully booked up. This obviously gets raised too, and if you're confused about the whole 3-stage thing, basically it's saying that this move does 600% attack damage unbooked up, which is, wow, that sounds just like Sia. That sounds just like Dario. So hopefully you're kind of picking up what I'm putting down here. But these are the units that I would try and aim to reroll for if you want to go through the reroll route. And the greatest part about Infinite Magicraid 2 is that you don't need 2 of the units. Now, I will say that if you decide to go for 2 of the units, I would kind of synergize it with HP burners being with HP burners. But I will say in some scenarios, you can get away with rocking or mixing in between with these guys. You don't have to rock a Maeve and also a Sia. You can rock Maeve and Oakman. You could rock Maeve and Hizanja. It doesn't really matter as long as you get a team composition that really works for you, because that is the brilliant part about Infinite Magicraid. Now, before I end the video here, if you made it this far, I want to kind of bring up a couple of other units that you guys should be taking a look at. Not in terms of legendary reroll units, but units that you can kind of pair up with your legendaries to kind of get your account going in terms of like steam and flowing through the campaign until you can kind of build up your legendaries to their maximum potential here. So some big honorable mentions in terms of epics here is going to have to be my boy Reeves. Reeves is just like another character you guys may be familiar with if you've done any research in terms of Infinite Magicraid. Holder, Reeves is basically the same thing here. This boy has counterattack and bleed, which is great in the beginning of the game because, as I said it before, with Melia, the beauty of counterattack is that it doesn't count as part of your turn. So if they hit him, he gets to hit them. it doesn't do that much damage. But if you're having a constant array of monsters hitting him, and he's surviving and he's hitting those guys back, that's going to be chip damage that over time, you know, over a couple turns is really going to add up. So he is one character that I would have in either one of these two rosters that I've picked out for you, just because he's useful, and as an epic he's naturally easier to build up as you're kind of spending time and getting your legendary units up to par. Another worthwhile mention too is going to be my boy Hardac here. Hardac is a great unit because, in my opinion, his kit literally synergizes the best out of any unit in this game so far. Now, Maeve is a very good second in terms of synergy between her skills, but Hardac is just a different breed of his own. Just to give you guys some quick lore on this guy too, he was once so powerful that he was soloing legendaries in the arena that the devs kind of had to tweak him just so that he wouldn't be as OP as he was. That is how insane Hardac was at one point in time. But basically the main selling point of Hardac is that you build him with a lot of defense, because his attacks scale off of his defense, meaning it's going to be very difficult for the units that you're facing in the campaign mode to kind of kill him unless he has defense down applied to him or some type of debuff that bypasses his defense. This is great for just having a unit on the field surviving and kind of, you know, chipping away at an enemy's health, while your HP burner, for example, may have their ultimate on cooldown, so you can wait until that next turn and get that cooldown off, because then you can kind of mitigate damage from that HP burner hopefully and have them hit Hardac instead, which is always great. And then of course it wouldn't be Infinite Magicraid if we didn't mention Holder. Holder, just like Reeves, does the same thing, but Holder is the original Reeves. I do believe that Holder also receives a attack up bonus with his counterattack versus Reeves, but yeah, hopefully that should explain it here. Basically, you go in with Holder, you make sure you cast counterattack. If he takes damage, he'll counterattack the enemy, and that chips away very, very quickly with their health. And many people have subscribed to the religion known as Holder. I don't think he's a bad unit at all. And of course, he can kind of carry you to the end of Nightmare, maybe kind of break you into Hell. But these are the epics that I personally find to be the most helpful, regardless if you want to be, you know, an easier reroller or if you want to go the hard route in terms of clearing out the campaign, because both sides have their strengths and weaknesses here. And having some of these epics within your team to fill out slots of characters that you don't have, because at the end of the day you can build these guys, and even if you may not use them later on in the game, there's still other content like the Advanced Serena, for instance. And then there's also the faction bond stage, which once again just means if you have a character built, it's going to benefit you a lot with clearing out content there, you guys. And right before we go, I know I keep on pulling you guys' chain here. I'm trying to find him. Where is he at? So if you guys end up pulling Focus with either the easy route or the hard route in terms of the campaign, if you're going to go the reroll route, Focus is a unit that you should definitely keep. And even if you don't pull a second unit from what I've shown you so far, the main selling point about Focus though is that he can kind of act as your second unit kind of temporarily, because he has a skill that resets the ultimate cooldown of whatever character that you're using, and he also has a lovely skill called Immortal, which, as its name implies, prevents death from your units as well. So say for instance you have Hizanja, you had Hizanja do his AoE move of HP burning, you want to get stacks off quickly. Same thing with Oakman. They just did their cooldown. It's now going to take 3 turns to get that off, but you don't have 3 turns. You can have Focus come in there, reset that skill, boost up their attack, and do all kinds of damage again. So next turn, Hizanja gets to do his AoE skill again. Next turn, Oakman gets to do his skill again. Same thing with Sia, same thing with Dario, same thing with Maeve. Hopefully things are kind of sticking in place for you right there, where he basically gets you another free hit of damage. So I'm not going to say that Focus by himself is going to do anything with you, but I could have sworn I've seen on Discord of players clearing out the campaign with Focus and like Hizanja, for example, just because the HP burning stacks went up super duper quickly. So if you end up pulling Focus as you go through the game, don't sleep on him. He can work with basically any composition in the game, because his main selling point is keeping everyone alive, boosting up the attack of your highest damage dealer, and making sure they can spam that cooldown. But basically, to summarize the video here, there is the easy route that you can go with in terms of reroll characters, and there's also the hard route. You can feel free to kind of mix them in between yourselves and see what works out best for you. If you want more information about what I did, I end up doing the hard route myself, so I have definitive proof of how difficult it can be, but it's definitely possible. But if you want to go the easy route, then I don't have any issues with that whatsoever, because trust me, it is a lot more chilled and a lot more relaxed than the hard route. But hopefully you guys found this video helpful in terms of reroll characters. I do apologize if it was a little bit too long, but I want to make sure I can kind of cover as much information as possible. Now, once again, if you don't see certain units on this list or certain units that I didn't bring up here, well, that's because of 2 reasons: time's sake and also just character efficiency. I haven't had the time or the luxury of testing out that character, so it's not to say that they're not viable, but if you do find another character viable, make sure you guys have joined the Discord and the subreddit as I've stated before here, and let me know. I would love to update the subreddit and update my beginner's guide and kind of integrate what you have put into the game, and of course I can credit you guys for that. But that's pretty much it, you guys. Consider subscribing if you haven't already so you don't miss out on the latest, greatest, and more from your boy Elio in terms of Infinite Magicraid. I'm really glad to have you guys here. I really hope that you guys enjoy the game, and hopefully I will see you in the next one. Peace out.
Infinite Magicraid. Play to slay.